if it's on at all. Okay, it's working? Okay. So this is the third continuation, even though it's Erev Chanas Esther. And it's a shala if you're allowed to talk about normal things. I'll try. I do have a lot of connections to the Megillah and stuff, but
It's like the bar with Eimer, they said on Megillah Chanukah.
that
There's a great bar that the reason why the Medrash says that, the Gemara says that he asked not to Eimer because that was the second day Pesach. What else are you talking about? It's a Matzim
right. Right, but also, yeah, okay, we're not going to talk about this. Point is, we're going to continue and we'll see what happens. So we were talking about, I don't remember everything that I said last week, so if I repeat myself, you remind me, and you'll help me move forward, okay? We're discussing that this Moses, Rabbi Maimonides, Heilige Rambam, figured out that the Torah actually makes sense, meaning that there's a structure to it. It's not just a list of stuff, like a very long list, like Taseres B'nai Haman, which I wrote a whole shtickle about this week, that's why you have to say it quickly. So it's like just a list, it doesn't make any sense. Lists don't make sense. They're just like, Parashandusa, Shmarashtush, Parkashtu, whatever. It's all the same thing. If you would like make it into psukim and stuff, then it starts making sense. Okay, he's on the right, he's like here. Right? And the Torah Rambam figured out that Tarek Mitzvah isn't just a random list. I even made a chart, I should have printed it for you. But there isn't, you know what I'm going to get? I'm going to get a big screen so I could show things. You could sponsor it. Still, I used to have one in my other class. I used to have a class in someone's office, and we used to use this like big thing, and would save paper. Although you have to spend some whatever other things, whatever the screen is made out of, but just easier. But would be a good idea. Anyways, so the a list doesn't make any sense. That's the point. So 613 is just a very long list. And of course, it's interesting, but we're not talking about that now, but it's interesting that whoever did the invention of this number 613 wasn't that Hashseli should do all 613. If you remember, that's Reb Lowy, whose drash this was, Masechtas Makos, and maybe in other places, but everyone knows it from there. It said that Moshe Rabbeinu gave 613 mitzvahs, right? 248 things to do and 365 things not to do. And then the Melech came and said, wait, that's not handleable, right? We need to make it into, reduce it. I remember it was 24, 11, 6, 3, 1. And Habakkuk came and said there's only one mitzvah, and it just says be a mensch, and that's all. So that, in other words, it's not really correct that, like, there is, like, used to be, like, people that just thought it was just a long list of 630 things to do or not to do. And then the Rambam came and said, well, there's really only 14 categories of things, which is a lot. Or the Mishnah even said there were 6 things, and so on. But really, originally this was, the whole point of someone saying that there's 630 was to say that it's not a reasonable amount of things to focus on. It needs to be reduced. Reduced not in the sense of cutting them off, in the sense of organizing it, right? Like Hamidon. Actually, I don't know if that's the pshat, but I always understood that that's the pshat. Like Hamidon means like he founded it, right? It's not like he reduced it to one, although might be literally what it means. But it means like reductions, like scientific reduction. Like we say, all these many things are really only one thing. There's one rule that controls them, or one basic thing that controls them. It's a principle, yeah. Like if you're Heilig Tumah, Fel Tzedek, you've got everything. And Habakkuk says we can make it even simpler, and so on. But amazingly, so this is what this member was, and it's not clear what actually the Reb Lowy himself meant to say, but that seems to be what he says. Some people say maybe it's 2 different sayings that were connected in the Gemara. But then later, at some point, we discussed this. But at some point in like Zman HaGoyim, more or less, people tried to answer this question: what is the law of the Torah? And the analogy of Sharia, of the Muslim law mostly. And they were like, we have to have a list of laws. We can't just have, like, before that, it was Torah. I don't know. And even this memra of 613 was never meant to be like a way of counting the laws, as the Ramban shows, and so on. But people decided to make a list, and they found this number to make a list. And then, even already from the beginning, if you look in the Lechus Gedolah list, doesn't actually only have 3 categories. He has 4 categories. He has, besides for Hassan, he has different ways of organizing them. And anyways, the Rambam's one of his big things was to say that these things have a logical structure, and not only do they have a logical structure, they also have this like headers and footers, or roots and branches, and some of them are roots and some of them are branches, and of course the roots turn out to be. So then we discussed last week. So that's the big thing, and of course people disagreed with him about this and so on, but about this specifically, the Rabbi Benel famously in this book. And others, I think he was one of the first ones to this has to do with this before the Maral, but when people started really criticize the whole way of thinking, and they started to say, well, maybe there isn't roots and branches, maybe it's just a list. And Rabbi Nel literally says this in the end of this book, which is about the Rambam's 13 principles, Ikrim, which is not the same as what we're discussing, so that's why I think that the question on the Ikrim is better than the one we're discussing. But he says that, and after explaining Dolshet's Rambam says this is all wrong because the Rambam read Aristotle, and Aristotle's ideal of a science is something that has principles and and roots and branches, and that's not true for Torah. Torah is just a list of commands that God gave us. It's a very long list, and they're all equal. That's what Rabbi Benel's thing is. Rabbi Isaac Rabbi Benel. I think it's hard for me to believe that he invented this criticism, but I think that he's the first one that explicitly says it. In this, literally says this. Maybe Rav Kreskas, but in some sense meant to touch something like this. And that is a very interesting criticism, and it can be made in very deep ways. We're not teaching the criticism, we're teaching the Rambam shit. In any case, and now we discussed, and we're getting into the details of this, right? We're getting into the details of this, and we discussed how. What did we discuss? We discussed how there's a bunch of levels of this, right? And this is very important. And by the way, also I have to say this, it's very important to realize that this Hamid al-Achas doesn't mean that you can now be a Reformed Jew. Of course, you should be a Reformed Jew, but not for this reason. It doesn't mean, right, that you say, okay, so there's only one thing, so we only have to do one thing. And I have a friend, Rabbi Shlomo Tikochinsky, who once wrote an article claiming that the whole Reb Simloi apparently was in touch with some Christians, early Christians, we know from other Midrashim, and he possibly said this member in order to dispute them. In other words, they said, so Paul says, we have to have only one thing and two things, so why do we have to have all these details and all these laws? And he's saying, well, there's all these laws, and they can be reduced to being a mensch, but that's why we have all these laws, so they should be reduced to being a mensch. So the point isn't everyone, and I have this discussion all the time. Did I have it here yet? Last week I discussed this a little bit, right? Everyone comes and says, well, Pesach is just to remember Tzias Mitzrayim, so I'll hang a sign, I'll remember Tzias Mitzrayim. And what I tell him is, and then the Orthodox people say, well, of course that reasoning is true, just we do Pesach not because it makes sense, not because it's a way to remember Tzias Mitzrayim, but because it's a chak, it's a gesetz, and that's what the gesetz says. And Yitzchok Lowy says that this is a bunch of hypocrisies. Why? Because if it says in the Torah this is the way to remember Tzias Mitzrayim, well, it could be explained also. But even before explaining it, probably it's true. Probably it's a better way to remember Tzias Mitzrayim than having a sign. And it happens to be people are sometimes so dumb and so naive. The Enlightenment people were like this. They were all these really naive people, and I figured out one basic rule, and now we could derive everything from first principles, and we don't have to do anything else. And you really think you're the one that discovered the concept of hanging signs, right? For thousands of years and all kinds of cultures and different elaborate ways of remembering Tzias Mitzrayim, or other people remember other things. Until finally we discovered that you can hang a sign. Thank you so much. So Tzitzis doesn't make sense. It says Man Tizkru. Oh, that's why you have to hang a string out of your clothing? How about we hang a sign? So basically we replace everything with hanging signs. Turns out there's not enough room in the world for so many signs. Or it turns out that, signs are a dumb way of remembering things, and we can explain it in 1,000 ways. Why? But it seems so dumb, and I hate that people and then, what's worse than this is me hacking, I don't know, I'm just tired. And what's worse than this is, I've already told this to Nachavris in the morning, that you people have to suffer more. What's worse than this is, so that's number one. Number one, it's just very dumb. It's assumes this most simplistic, we can rediscover, we could just have one principle and hang it on a sign. Yeah, sure, it makes a lot of sense. Come on. And maybe it's true for some autist somewhere, but that's not how things work. Come on. And it always comes with weird historicism, signs were invented in 1972. Hello, Nobody thought of hanging signs before that. Oh, they were all in alphabets that didn't know how to read. Like, what are you talking about? And secondly, so that's one thing. So that question seems to me to be very dumb. Secondly, is that this, from the Orthodox perspective, it's even more dumb. So number one, you accept this stupid argument, which is dumb. Like, think 5 minutes, you'll notice that it doesn't actually work. Or actually, you know something? Try to remember something. How do you commemorate your anniversary if you do? With a sign? Like, what are you people talking about? Happy anniversary, that's pretty sure that's not how it works. So even if there's a sign, the sign is like part of something bigger. And if it's just a sign, like, I'm going to send myself a text on my anniversary. I'll send my wife a text. It's our anniversary. Like, that's what you're proposing, right? Hi, it's our anniversary. Right. Thank you. Right. Okay, so of course, memory means more than remembering. It doesn't mean like have it in the database. And remembering means more than that. Everything.
I had a good like post Pesach. It was like the first Shabbos of Pesach. It was the COVID year, so we made our own Pesach. So like my wife, she's gonna make challah. So her neighbor made challah, and she gave it to me. She gave it to us. My wife was on a diet. She didn't eat any challah. And I kept on reminding her to think her that it was good. She could not remember. I was like, see, this we have to eat matzah. I ate it. You saw.
Did you remember that it was good?
I keep on remembering that. I keep on remembering to thank her. You cannot remember. You saw her 5 times. You cannot remember because you didn't eat it.
Yeah, and so on. So that's number one. And so, firstly, the question is dumb. And what's even worse is that because of this stupid question, then the Fremiden have this like habit of believing the stupidest of questions, and because of that, becoming more dumb. Because like we can't answer this question, therefore you have to become dumb. And like it's a mitzvah. What can we do? Mitzvah. Mitzvah is a mitzvah. So the Fremiden said that because of this dumb question, so we have to make up a new thing. It doesn't say in the Torah anywhere. So in my Torah it says they should eat matzah in order to remember Yitzchok. That's what it says in my Torah. I don't have a Torah that says you eat matzah because it's a gesetz. That doesn't say. The whole Torah doesn't say the word gesetz. It says chok and doesn't mean that. And it says a lot of different things. Mitzvah. It doesn't say gesetz anywhere. I don't know. Rabbi Martin Buber says it says a gebot, nicht a gesetz. You know this Torah. Anyways. Point is, a law. It doesn't say in the Torah the word law anywhere. Or maybe it does. What's translation? Who knows? Point is, that's not what it says. But in order to preserve this like thing to save it from these stupid questions, they invented a whole new thing, mamish a new thing, a mamish lekusiv Torah anywhere, which is that we do things not because of the reasons that says in the Torah. Plain apikoiris. The Torah says you should keep Shabbos to remember Shesh Neberesh. There's another reason. Okay, there's 2 reasons, 3 reasons, 10 reasons. I don't know. The Torah says that there's a reason, and you apikoiris, you're smarter than the Torah, and you invented a whole category. It doesn't say nicht in the Torah, nicht in the Chazal, nowhere. Until soon you'll tell me. It doesn't say anywhere. Promise you it doesn't say anywhere, which is that there's some things that are arbitrary or some way kind of arbitrary. They're just a law, and they have to be followed because they're the law. I mean, the Rambam invented this. People a very long time ago invented things like this. It gets worse and worse every year, but people invented it a long time ago. And that is another thing that doesn't say anywhere. So why don't you believe it? Let's say you don't, let's even say I'm making a Fremma argument. Let's even say we don't understand. We don't understand how matzah is the best way for remembering Yitzchok Mitzrayim. It seems to me that sending ourselves a text would be better. Okay. Okay. But why don't you at least believe the Torah? Where your whole thing is you have to have bittul, you have to believe the Torah. Well, the Torah doesn't say that that it doesn't make sense, but you should do it anyways. The Torah says that it makes sense, so you should say it makes sense. Now, I don't understand how. Maybe I'll try to learn. Maybe I won't learn. I'll just assume that that they're smarter than me and they know better. But why do we have to? Doesn't make any sense, right? Now it gets even worse. No, not worse. Like more serious. Like there's a very famous Ma'amar Chazal. It says in the Rambam brings it at the end of Sefer HaMitzvahs very interestingly. It's like the last stick of Sefer HaMitzvahs, and it's also the last 3 mitzvahs. So there's a mitzvah for I feel like I should give it drusha because I have the whole table. Because there's a mitzvah. There's a mitzvah of for a king not to have too many horses and too many money and too many wives. Okay, 3 things that you shouldn't have too much of: horses, sisim, nashim, and kesev azav. Okay. Yeah, interesting. 3 things. And it says why? Because if you have too many of them, if you have too many horses, you'll go back to Mitzrayim. If you have too many money, you can think you're going to have gava. You'll be thinking if you have too many wives, you'll start becoming too womanly, something like that. So it says the Gemara that this pusik was a bad idea. Why is this Torah usually not explain itself? Which is another very interesting assumption, because I think that that's only true if you read the Torah in a certain way. So this is already Chazal. It's not really true that Lein is Gal Talmid Torah, like the Rambam says. And this is the Rambam. Like the Rambam says, that Lein is, many of the halachos we think make no sense, or they don't come with a built-in explanation, is just because we're reading it a very long time later. So this is the historicist, right? So he says, like, of course, if you would be in, and the Rambam assumes this, like, if you would be in times of Moshe Rabbeinu, and you would see all the Egyptian priests walking around with the opposite of pious, and Moshe would come and say, Rabbi, are we wearing pious? You'll understand it. Doesn't have to explain it. But now that we don't know how the priests dress. I don't know anything. So of course now we don't know what it means. So this assumption that the Torah doesn't explain itself is actually a suspicious assumption. Okay, so but let's assume that it's true. But anyways, it's a logic. The word that they're saying is still true in any case. It says the Gemara. Why doesn't it say? Because look, there were 3 mitzvahs that the Torah had a reason. And the Torah had a reason. Came Shlomo Melech. So of course, this is Chazal reading very well the Tanakh and seeing it says Shlomo Melech. And Shlomo Melech had, so it's like literally like if you be like a Bible critic and read it backwards, you'll say, well, this pasuk is anti Shlomo Melech pasuk, right? But Chazal just read it the same way. They just read it forward instead of backwards, but it's the same vart, right? But that doesn't matter which way direction you say it; it's still the same vart. They're saying that this pasuk is fighting with Shlomo Melech, right? No, I'm going because you understand that this Chazal is not like I have to realize, it's not like just they're like they saying that there's a mistake here and happens to be Shlomo Melech made this mistake. They actually read the parsha of Sefer Melachim. Sefer Melachim is clearly critical of Shlomo. Exactly, literally says this language that Nashav Hitu Levava. It literally says this language, which is language of Sefer Dvarim. And it literally talks about this problem happening. So of course, these psukim have to be read together. So in other words, there is something going on here where, in certain sense, you could say the Parshas Sefer, the Parshas Kesufah, whichever it is, I remember Shoftim, is foreshadowing Shlomo Melech's mistake, right? It's saying, do not have too many wives because too many wives are not a good thing for a king. You could read the Megillah and you'll see that even one wife is a problem. So, kavachayim, too many, not a good thing. So, right? So, says the Gemara, so the Gemara says like this. The problem was that Shlomo HaMelech, I'm trying to be clear because there's a basic thing. Shlomo HaMelech, I'm going to say it enough times until it becomes clear. Shlomo HaMelech made a mistake. He saw that it says the reason. This is how the Rambam reads the Gemara. Shlomo HaMelech saw that there's a reason. Why can't you have too many wives? So they shlo hit the levavai. So he said, you know something? I'll have a lot of wives and they won't be hit the levavai. And the same thing, why can't you go have too many horses? Because Mitzrayim is the biggest horse exporter, apparently. And the Torah didn't like the idea for some reason of us being reliant on Mitzrayim. Who knows? It's so problematic. They don't guard. They let Hamas smuggle things through the border. Whatever.
Yirmiyah
problematic.
Either, right? Yirmiyah doesn't either.
Some days, yeah. Okay. And not only Yirmiyah, none of them liked Egypt, because Egypt wasn't an empire, and therefore was not a good idea to rely on someone that doesn't really want to have an empire. Okay. And they tried sometimes to be empire, but they were Shach empire. Anyways, that's the thing, right? I feel like the steam is on for no reason. It's true. You can turn it off. There's like a little button in the corner, like a remote thing. Anyways.
You want me to turn it off?
Yeah, thank you. Unless you want it to be so warm. There's like a yeah, that's all. Thank you. Right. So now everyone thinks Shlomo Melech is like this reformer. That's how the people read this. Everyone has been reading this Gemara for 1,000 years. Shlomo Melech was a reform rabbi. It was like the whole reason why you have to keep Shabbos is to be moral. We'll just be moral without keeping Shabbos, and therefore we should keep Shabbos without being moral. That's the lesson of the story, right? What? How did we get? What's going on? It doesn't make any sense. This is so upside down, right? So therefore, says the Gemara, so the rest of the mitzvahs we don't say, because you see that the moment you say the reason, people don't do it. So like the Tanzarif says, well, I'm going to tell you, Mashiach Chametz, although why? I'm not telling you why. So I'll tell you why, you'll have a kasha on that. So better if you don't know why. So this doesn't make any sense. Why doesn't it make sense? And then I realized one day that this reading of this Chazal, of this Memra, is very dumb. Why? Because if the story would be something like this, we thought that the reason, so it was like a mistake. We thought that the reason not to have too many wives is to lo yosef levavai. And because of that, we had too many wives, and something else bad happened. Something else bad happened, what happened bad? He had too many wives. That's an avayra. He did an avayra. Right? The problem was he did an avayra. Shteit in the Torah, don't have too many wives, and he had too many wives. So therefore, next time we won't tell you, We won't tell you the reason, and you'll be makayim the law without regard to the point of the law, right? That's how people seem to understand this. But that's not what happened with Shlomo HaMelech. What was the problem? What was the thing that happened with Shlomo HaMelech had too many wives? Yeah, it actually was, the law was right.
Why did he do it?
Why did he do it? That's a good question. But the fact is, like this is the push pshat, right? Before we get into this chazal, this pusik, like I was saying, is talking about Shlomo HaMelech, or people like him. The law was right. Having too many wives causes problems. It was right. The reason is not, people always like say, if, so just disproving the basic logic, if the whole reason is to remember, so I'll remember without it. So in other words, you're disputing the reason. That's what I was saying. The Torah says that if you want to have lo yaseh levavah, don't have too many wives, and you say, no, I have a different way of lo yaseh levavah. What's the other way? I don't know, I'll go to mikvah. I have a different solution.
See, when people do have this thing where they're extra reliant on their moral capacities in critical situations when usually doesn't pan out.
So wait, very good. So very good. So wait, so what's the mistake? So what's the mistake that Shlomo HaMelech made? Not that he didn't take the law as a law. His mistake that he made was the exact mistake that the simple understanding of the law tells us. Actually, what the Tam says, that's what happened. He had too many wives, and
So it was.
Right, but why did he do it?
so now you say, so what did he think? What was the Havamina? Teretz says the Havamina was the exact Havamina that this Pusik is talking about. This Chiddush of Shlomo HaMelech that said, Ani arve v'lo yaseh, right? That wasn't Shlomo HaMelech's Chiddush. That's what the Pusik was thinking about. When a Pusik comes and says, don't have too many wives because that will lead you. It means to say, you think that you'll have too many wives and it won't lead you. I'm telling you it will. That the Pusik was, it's built into the Pusik already.
He was able to do it, basically.
But he's not making a Chiddush. It's not pshat, there's like Reb Shimon, Dorish Tam the Reb Shimon says, there's a beged almon. There's only the whole Torah standard like two halachos. Now look this way. Reb Shimon the almon is not. It says in the Torah l'sach beged almon. Skip Reb Shimon and says, look, what's the wrong with almon? Almon is not someone that has never a husband. Almon is someone that's poor. So don't take a beged. So therefore, if she's not poor, better. Let's sit this Reb Shimon. Comes Rabbi Yehuda and says, without Torah shtam dekra. If she's not almon, and nobody says, so this is a problem. Machlekes and hilchos. Machlekes tanam and dash shtam dekra. Shlomo's problem wasn't that he's machadash a new heter. He said. Because you have to think about it, that's not a real heter, right? It's very different. I'm trying to make there's a very basic difference, right? People usually conflate these things. There's a very basic difference to Reb Shimon's heter of being chovel the beged almana ashira, right? There's one more halacha, I forgot it now. You remember? There's a very big difference in Reb Shimon's heter based on Tama Dekro and Shlomo HaMelech's heter. What's the difference? That Reb Shimon was saying the Pusik is talking about a certain case. In that case, there's a certain logic. And I understand it. I agree with the Pusik, right? And I'm telling you that, and therefore, in a different case, it's different. And everyone agrees. By the way, this is nothing new. This is how halacha always works. No, every single halacha we have to, and it's a new case.
They're not total. They're not different in the sense that.
So then there's a question: is difference defined? Is the reason the time of the Torah, the fact that the Pusik says the reason? Is that
says that the Torah must be talking about nashim that are shalaitz kaniyas, and I only married.
Yes, that would be a good teretz. Then he might be right even.
Maybe
this medrash is not talking about that, right? This medrash is talking about nashim nachris. Okay, assuming that whatever exactly you're talking about. The problem with Shlomo HaMelech was that he did precisely what the Pusik was talking about. He wasn't a chadash anu shtickle Torah. His ani arbe v'le'oser is precise. There's no hat. I mean, that's what Reb Shimon. Remember, Reb Shimon this time Gemara said according to this Pusik. Not only harbe li'arbe le'anashim, afile echad of mesira levava is ochetas. Because it's machlokes tanam. Some of them say it's a number, so there's a number. We'll figure out which number is too many. And Hashem says no. The problem is not the number. The problem is mesira levava. So if she's mesira levava, in other words, like you're saying, see that's shit to Reb Shimon. That's not Shlomo HaMelech. That's a very legitimate shitta. Machlokes tanam. That's normal. You say achas mesira levava. What's achas mesira levava mean? It doesn't mean the one that will mesira levava. It means one who is the kind of to be mesira levava. Like she's Tzidonius, Chetonius, Amorius, whatever, all the people from Shlomo HaMelech. Of course, that's a problem. Even one. And then the other people say, no, because the Pusik says, Rabbim, ask me more than one. One, even if it's mitter, even if she's a mitzvah. But Shlomo HaMelech's thing wasn't that he was mechadish this heter. What the moral of the story of Shlomo HaMelech, I'm trying to get something very basic. The moral of this story of Shlomo HaMelech is not that when you mechadish a terim based on their form logic, something bad happens. The moral of the story is that the Torah was right to begin with, right? So when it said, that is actually what happens. And of course you're going to think it's not. The Pusik was talking about that. Shlomo HaMelech was not, there's nothing new in Shlomo HaMelech. You think like Shlomo HaMelech was a tzaddik, of course, that's something we said, he must have been a tzaddik, he must have had a cheshbon. Well yeah, of course, everyone has a cheshbon, there's nothing new, everyone has this cheshbon. Same like I'm telling you, It's very similar to what I'm telling you. Like you think you're going to remember Yitzchok by writing a note. Yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu thought about that, and that's actually why he said not to do that and to eat matzah, because he already thought about this and he realized that doesn't work. Right? So it's nothing new, and seems to me that all of these like discussions like forget this, that the original pshat was that this leads to this. Like we say, it's a slippery slope.
Making the subway.
And every time you say,
if you stand on the yellow line over there, you'll be hit by lightning. No, if you stand on the yellow line, you might get hit by the actual train.
Exactly. And now, of course, like we're saying, now what the Gemara is saying is a very simple thing, that people are dumb. Not dumb. People, in other words, what the Gemara is saying is not people are dumb. That people, like, for the same exact reason why we're telling you not to have too many wives, because of Lesa Levavoy, it's not always a good idea for me to tell you the reason. Why? Because that causes people to not understand the reason. Not because they cause people not understand the halacha. Causes people not to understand the reason. Because the whole idea of this reason is that this is something that you don't notice. If it would be something that you notice, it wouldn't need a pasuk for it, right? If it's automatically Maseh Levavoy, then we don't need it. We don't need a separate isser for having too many geld. That would be already the isser, whichever isser is the it's an isser by itself. Right? We have the existence of this is because we had a problem. The problem was that people kept on doing this and being Maseh Levavoy, so we made an isser. Right? So it's really the problem that you think you're being Goy, that's the exact problem that the mitzvah was solving in the first place.
Right. There's also like
I hope this makes sense.
A practical understanding of it. Like if the halacha is that afilu achas, right? If it's no good, you shouldn't do it. So it's kind of hard to quantify. It's hard to qualify that and to give it such specific parameters. So you have to have some kind of. If you say liyarba, you'll get most scenarios, right? Even if you provide the exact reason, you might actually miss something.
Okay, but these are like
the details.
These are logics of uniformity of law, and I don't know if the Torah actually believes in that logic. All these really is like lip-lug, or Aristotle talks about this. The law wants to be universal, and it wants to apply universality to a domain which is not really universal, and you get into all these problems. I don't know if that's the real reason. Of course, when the Tanoim do this, and that's why you could, of course, if like. The machlokes Tanoim might be not even about the question if we have to do the logic. The question is like where to put the limit, where to put the gvul, how do you say, the boundary, where to set the boundary. That makes sense.
Essentially what you're saying though, that like the Maisa, you're going to come up with a cheshbon.
Well, in every sense, you're going to have to set a boundary somewhere, because like you could always say that smoking is Maseh Levavoy. Like it's two different. The issur is to have too many wives. But what I'm saying is that. The Isser is precisely because everyone is going to say what Shlomo Melech says. Shlomo Melech wasn't mechader something. That's to begin with the point. And when the Gemara says this is why the Torah usually doesn't say it, I don't know if that means to say, because like I told you before, did the Gemara really not realize that the Torah does actually explain most of the mitzvahs? The Gemara itself, like the Rambam says, from the famous Medrash of Puradim, the Rambam says, and it's a good proof. The Rambam says, the Chazal read all the mitzvahs, and they said, 3-4 things we don't understand. It's a Medrash in Kelis Rabbah and Vik Rabbah. Shlosh ele nifle memeni v'abole yadatim. So 3 things I don't understand. I don't understand Dalet Minim, and I don't understand like 3 different things. Like Puradim is a problem. Okay, but so the rest of them you didn't understand, right? Until Parshas Chukas, everything made sense. So Chazal weren't these people that assumed everything is just all that made no sense. And it can't even be, because all of halacha is based on the reasoning of the mitzvahs. There isn't any halacha in the world that's not based on understanding the goal of the law. There isn't. Even when they make drushes, it's based on finding the reasoning from the source and so on. It's never like there's some formality that the positive is thing. So, yeah. So now.
So the problem with reform is not changing the halacha, changing the reason.
The problem with reform is not understanding human nature. Nothing to do with with the Torah.
The main thing they're changing is the reason more than the.
Yeah, because they don't. In other words, or to say it the other way around, it's something like this: that if you accept human society, human people in its entirety, and you start from one principle. So this is the thing that many people seem to not get is because they don't have experience. They don't have experience in creating systems, and even the people like the Enlightenment people are like all about creating systems. Their systems don't work. They've been tried and failed. None of them work. Yeah, at least it doesn't work in the simple way that they say it works. If it works by magic or in the same messy way that everything worked until then, right? But the actual like very basic system, we're going to have like some communist slogan and reorganize everything according to that. That doesn't work. Everyone realized, even the communists agree that doesn't work, right? It's not a shal if it works in that simple way.
It's an easier
In other words, what I'm trying to say is something like this. We have, again, this very, very naive way of asking questions. I keep on getting this question. I'm going to have to like give a 10 sheet just to refer everyone to them and say, stop asking me this dumb question because it's dumb. Okay, and I always used to think that it's smart, but it's dumb. Why is it dumb? It's dumb not in the sense of like 1 + 1 is 17. It's dumb in the sense of, okay, you know something? I want to also have a very simple life. I want to also have a very simple law. It makes sense. Like what did everyone say? The Rambam says that everything is just about not having what this is about. Okay, so that explains shatnez. Everyone looks at it like that's nuts. Well, you know something? I'll give you a project. And go to some place where you think is of a deserted place, or you know something, try to solve any basic social problem or any belief people have, and you let me know if you manage to solve it without getting to the level of shatnez. In other words, let's say shatnez is 35 levels, like we said, there's a tree, shatnez is already like a leaf, on a branch, on a thing. Let's say, I agree with that, but I want to see you doing it in the less steps, okay? Most of us would probably have more steps than the Torah has. And come on, this human laws end up being much more complicated than divine laws, right? People think that it's very sad that we're stuck with this very ancient law that was written who knows how long ago. But turns out, I'm not answering all the questions with this, but it turns out that actually, and of course, the real answer to everything is that everything depends on the judge, like the living, dying. That's one thing I really believe in. But it turns out that the civil law, like the non-kosher law, is 10 times more complicated and 10 times harder to change than the divine law. Interesting, right? Like we're stuck with Hilchos Gittin that says, like Hilchos Gittin is only 10 halachos. Like learn Hilchos Gittin in the Rambam, it's only 10 prukim, whatever. It's not so much. The New Jersey state laws of Gittin is much longer and actually much more random and much more complicated and actually has its own issues. And
much more disconnected from the actual issues they're trying to deal with.
Well, they're not disconnected. It's the same exact thing happened. There was a smart guy. Hopefully, sometimes it was just a politician trying to win votes. But there was a guy that said, there's a problem, we're going to solve it. And he wrote up like 10,000 pages of regulations. And then the second day on the job, the regulations stopped working. So we had to add more. And that's a problem. And actually, the Mnachtzah Mazel, we have this thing with God gave us the law. And there's only 10 halachas, and there can't add more. There can be more, there can be minhagim, takanas, but they're never going to become the actual law. And therefore, if you really want, and even if assuming there's a problem, if you want to solve it, all you have to do is learn those 10 psukim. It's amazing. There's no way for it to grow. In reality, it's not really true. But theoretically, at least for some of my more reform inclined friends, there's no way for it to grow because the whole thing is based on this very old book, so therefore it stops. Like we say always, it's because it's complete and so on. But anyways, that's another thing. That's random, not the guy. What I was main thing that I wanted to say is that this whole argument that people always say that this week is Parshas Vayikra and all the Rishonim already said that the Rambam's reasons for communists make no sense. I don't know. To me, this all the Yeshiva Bachram. It's like people sitting in a laboratory, in this ivory tower, and dreaming of how they're gonna get people out of Avodah Zarah with less than this. Okay, I don't think we managed with this. Come on, this is what the Rambam we discussed this last week, right? So. But even more logically, like I was saying, all these slippery slope arguments, they all happened. They're not things. And if you start with one very simple thing, you are going to end up all the way down the chain, and probably much further along the chain than the Mishnah Torah ends up, for sure. Okay, that's enough. And that's why I said, for example, I found there's the Rambam said about Daled Minim, he says the simplistic pshat. And then again, people, and he actually noticed over there that he's bothering people, and he gave this whole rant about how the Medrash is just poetry, and you shouldn't take it too seriously. And really, there's this basic reason that it's to thank Hashem for the fruit and so on.
And they're available.
Yeah, and then Rav Shem Tov, Rabbi Shem Tov, who wrote a Perush on the Nevuchim, gives us also his little rant, and he says that some people, if I remember correctly, it's some people are okay, so therefore we don't have to be makbar on esrei because it's all just like this little thing. So then he says, you people are messed up. It's the opposite. Now, because there is this reason, that is why you have all the halachos esrei. And it actually all makes sense. For some reason, the nature of making sense, and this is another whole thing, this has to do with yesterday's class. the nature of making sense is reduction, at least for most people. There are some people for making sense is just like overwhelming you with details and then like you don't know what's flying. There's such people, I know them. But for most people, making sense is always going to be reduction in the sense of like making sense of, no, not only by its size, like fundamental size, like to make sense of a whole, no. What does making sense even mean? Making sense means reducing things to something understandable, right? So like if there's there's the weather or something like that, but at some point people discover that, yeah, it's true, there's a lot of different kinds of weathers, but there's only like 4 seasons. And if you want, like 6 seasons, 8 seasons, not less than 10. Very small number, right? Now we understand. Now we get how the system works. Like other Maimonides didn't understand. He was making all these emetayim, the days getting shorter, longer. Figured out, okay. Now of course it doesn't. This is always a criticism, and it's very serious criticism. Like this doesn't actually Let me get to this. So the other Maimonides, right? Does this make sense? First, like if you're like the data, the givenness of the world is that every single day is different. There's 365 days in the year. Like we'd have that's 365 laces, right? There's 365 days. By the way, even to figure that out is not so simple. What does it even mean? How do you count the year? Do you know how to do it with your naked eye? The year, sun year, the solar year? How do you count it? What?
The solar year,
Yeah, but what is it based on? No, don't tell me the theory. Tell me how you get to it.
You know exactly
what is the solar year? This, as far as I can tell, the sun comes up every day and goes up every night. Goes down every night.
Goes back and forth.
Okay, so you have to be pretty smart, just to be realized. You have to keep track of the sun. That the sun is in that corner of the sky, and it moves through the corner, right? It moves from north to south, not from east to west. And it's even slightly more complicated than that, but it moves from north to south throughout the year. And you figure out the sun this is not something that needs very serious observation to just get at. Oh, we don't realize, we always say like the solar year is the revolution of the sun, of the earth around the sun, right? But that's just the theory. That's not how people discovered it, right? Or even if you have the opposite theory, it doesn't answer the question, right? In other words, a solar year, like the moon is simple. It takes only 3-4 weeks. You see it coming and going every year, every month. But the sun is actually more complicated. That's why the lunar calendar is older than the solar calendar. I don't know exactly true, but you need to have some science for a solar calendar to exist. So something complicated. And what I'm getting at is, okay, but I don't know how I got to this. I'm just like making people aware of that they're like things. What you always tell me, solar year is the sun going around us. Nobody ever saw the sun going either around the earth or the opposite. What we saw is that the sun is on a different location every day of the year, and you don't notice it when you drive your car. You have to wake up, and I've read there's this medieval thing that said, when the sun is behind the spire of the church, that's when you should plant your whatever. It's a whole thing. And then now, if the data, right, what we actually know is that every single day is slightly different. And okay, we can also see the days getting shorter and longer depending on where you live in the world, right? Every single day is slightly different. The sun comes up at a slightly different angle. The days are shorter and are slightly shorter, slightly longer. There's no 2 days that are the same. Right? So the facts are, there are 365 different things. There's no connection between them, right? And this is not called understanding, although this is the fullness of it, right? Now, if I explain it to you, I tell you, this is all explained by one thing, instead of 365. So again, this is really a scientific reduction. I can even give you a mythical reduction, which says, like David HaMelech did, right? Before Chavaka came and did science, which we have that one. Listen, there's only 4. The sun really only does 4 things. I know every day is different, but at the end of the day, in other words, if I ask you, why is the day 10 hours long today? You say, well, because we're somewhere in between the equinox. And this is this quarter of the year, that's about how long the day is. That's which corner of the sky is. So now instead of having 365 things, you only have 4 things, right? And then we can go even further and get into one thing, which is there's one orbit, and that's what explains everything. Okay, it's not entirely one orbit. You need a few more facts to explain more facts. But anyways, now, and then what's funny is that and this is how all science works. It always works by reduction, by making things boring, right? So it was so interesting. Every day I woke up and I was looking, where's the sun? Oh. And then someone told me, there's just one formula that solves the whole thing. And now it's boring. And now this is what people complain about Tamei HaMitzvahs. They realize that this is the same complaint. And say, really? That explains why on Tuesday, March 14th is over here, and Wednesday it's March 15th is over there? Are you crazy? How does this connect? You just told me one very basic thing. The sun turns around all the time. How does this connect all these infinite, all these tons of, it's infinite if you count seconds, but if you believe Zeno, that it's infinite. Anyways, all these 10,000 variations, how does it explain all of them? You say, yes, that's what it's meant to do. That is how it works. And there's always actually it's true, like people say science takes away the magic of the world. Right? That's what it's supposed to do. Or at least if that means magic. Like now you wake up, you already know, you have a calendar. I actually can tell you in 10,000 years where the sun is going to be in every location if I can do the math. There's nothing to discover, nothing new. You wake up and someone will tell you. I wake up and you're supposed to say, well, nothing going on. It's just math. Maybe this is a question. It's obviously a question that people have been asking for a long time. But honestly, it's just confusing different things. Of course, the sun coming up is interesting for you, but that doesn't mean that the explanation of the reason of that or the cause of that has to be varied. It's the whole point, it's the opposite. Causes are always less than their effects. Remember Plato? Causes are always less. The whole point of them is to reduce things to make them less. And it seems to me that the people who are upset at Torah mitzvahs just don't get science. Don't get how this is what it's supposed to do. It was always supposed to show you how there is one little thing that causes all the things. Of course, this one little thing is not really little. It looks little. And this is all like sort of an illusion. It's actually stronger and greater than all the details because that causes all the details. Right? And of course, the details become less valued in some sense. But not less than they were before. They're more unexplainable, but not less valued. They then become less. You were just confused. You thought that every day there's a whole new thing. Like God wakes up and decides to put the sun over there. And that sounded interesting to you, but that didn't actually make sense to anyone. And now you have this very basic system, and it explains every day. And now you're like, well, there's two things. I'm confusing a whole bunch of points here. But the first point is that the question of that doesn't explain all the details is nonsense. Doesn't even make sense. It does explain all the details. That's what it's supposed to do. That's called explaining. If there would be an explanation, that's why the Rambam says he can't explain details. Okay, there's more things in this level, but explaining means ignoring details. Because we're explaining the details by the rule or by the principle. That's what it always is. So at the moment you say there are principles, what you're going to do is say that the details are not what makes the details details, the principles are what makes them the way they are. Right. Now you ask
From the front and back there?
What?
From the front and back, what you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. And people think that there's another level of this because of under the moon, according to Aristotle, there's no real science. But anyways.
Hypothetically, the details can make a principle, is that what you're saying?
Well, they can't. In other words,
Meaning maybe they are, meaning who's to say which one comes first?
Well,
these details
assuming that but assuming that there's a real explanation, and the reason why the sun is every day where it is because of the one thing called the orbit, the circle, the cycle of the sun. You could say there's no cycle. How do we know that? That's a question of how we know it. But at least the way that logic is supposed to work is this way, right? And you could also say, if you would have now, there's a different two kinds. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of different kinds of questions you could ask in this kind of thing. Like one of them is if you would see the sun in the wrong place, it's like your basic theory predicts it to be here, and I think it's there. Then you have a serious question. And there's some people that say that according to the Rambam it should be like this, and it's not like that. That's a question. But most of the time that they really didn't understand why it actually has to be there. In other words, you didn't understand the theory, because just me telling you, the sun revolves on the earth doesn't actually allow you to calculate. Now, get back to what we were saying before, last class. In order to actually get from the one principle to the daily level of detail, you need something in between. It's not actually true that if someone knows that the sun revolves around the world, or the world around the sun, that he can tell you where the sun will be every day of the year. You need some more information than that, right? Whatever, I don't know what it is even, I don't remember. But there's more, you need something more.
It's two of them.
You need a lot more information. You need in other words, you need some information to connect the principle to where you are. You say, well, where are you in the world? What's you say, where did it start from? A whole bunch of different other facts or other things that need to help you to get from one to the other. And of course, when you say, well, you're one thing, but I only heard the basic principle, it didn't allow me to get there. Yes, it's true. Because you're missing some connecting thing, but that doesn't mean that that's not the basic principle. It just means that you're missing some connecting tissue. You're just missing some things in between. So that's one kind of question. So the question of people have this thing that doesn't seem to be reasonable that one simple thing should cause so many details, And that seems to be nonsense. There's something where, then there's another thing that people say that seems to make all the details less exciting. I don't know how to respond to that though. Like less what we said, meaningful. Is every day meaningful? If it's only 1 more degree that the sun moves?
Well, if you only find meaning in very small things, but the point is to change your focus to the greater thing.
Find meaning in the orbit.
Yeah.
I don't know what meaningful means. You see, this is something that I don't understand entirely.
Even still, I think like there is something added. Let's say, right, if you watch a bunch of people play chess for a very long time, and there's all different, you see this little thing that looks like a horse, and it's in many different places, and someone walks away from the table very frustrated, and someone else walks away happy. There's something gained by understanding how the pieces move, and that they follow a certain kind of, pattern, and the queen always goes diagonally. And
Right, well, the simplification is actually helping you.
it is right, exactly, and it does simplify it. Every single game of chess, even though there's millions of variations, boils down to a few basic
But it would probably be
principles.
would it be more
That enhances the
mysterious if you didn't know?
experience.
Yeah?
It's
I think so.
Even if you understand the math, there's still, I think, something kind of like interesting in even particular variations of the game, right? There are more and less boring games of chess that all devolve from the same set of rules, right?
So what's this thing about mystery? Do we
I think
do
it's
we
a different part of you.
Mystery is if you value novelty over complexity, I think.
I think they come from different parts of you.
I think if you want to see new things, then and that's what excites you, then you want the world to remain mysterious. If you gain pleasure from the order of things and from understanding the variation that's possible to emerge from order, I think the world becomes a lot more interesting.
Yeah, well, what do you think?
I think it's different parts of you that are enjoying it. One is like your seichel, one is like some.
What the Rambam calls imagination.
Yeah, something like that. One's like stimulating you, and one is getting pleasure of knowledge. I think it's two different things. Right? One is you see this game just and you understand it, and one is you don't understand it and it's just like.
But like you're saying, at least in some sense, at least for some level of truth, it's the opposite. Because if someone has no idea of what is going on, he doesn't actually
Doesn't
understand.
enjoy anything, right? You might enjoy
It would
the
be
fact that people walk away
very.
from the game happy and upset, and not kind of like be surprised at the outcome. One guy shows up to the table and he's in rags, and another guy shows up and he's in a suit, and the guy in rags is like triumphant, while the guy in a suit just like stomps away from the table. That might be, that's what he would find amazing, instead of the person who understands the intricacies
Well,
of
then
the
he
game.
knows something. Well, then he knows something. That's coming from a different level.
You know something, but he doesn't know.
So obviously you have to know something to get anything.
But isn't
The thing is,
even-
but
ultimately, what is
only
getting
what to
pleasure?
be gained, I think, if you appreciate the world from a perspective of organization.
Right, but isn't even with the organization, there's still a lack of knowingness. For example, you won't enjoy watching the chess game if you know the outcome, correct? There's even in that model, there's still a lack of there's still mystery. No.
Well, that's not. No, the outcome is not the principle.
Right,
That's not the principle.
meaning we're not saying we know.
Yeah, but that is what people are watching.
But that's details, right? Knowing the outcome of chess game is just.
Well, it's details, but it really, if you like it's really details of the rules of the game plus the knowledge and skill of the people playing it, right? And the only reason it's interesting is because we don't actually have like a supercomputer that also knows how to predict what those people will do. If that would be part of the system, then it would also just like there's some math that tells us who will win every chess game in the universe, also, right?
But you're not.
And then that would be interesting again.
Well, maybe it's because
No,
we
but
don't
I
have
think
that
even
level
to
of
watch
knowledge,
certain
right?
configurations is
So
always
the guy,
interesting,
right? The guy
right?
who doesn't
There are
understand
games
the
that are
board
seen as a
level,
brilliant
understand-
game,
It
right?
makes sense, it's boring, but no, you get stimulated your knowledge.
I don't know. I really wonder about this. Like, imagine you do like Kabbalah. Like, let's enumerate all the variations of letters that are possible. Like, you could have A and B, A and C, and so on, and basically all words are gonna end up in one of them. But like most configurations are not words; they're just syllables. Like, would that like explain you how words work somehow? Like, do we get anything out of this? It seems that you should. Like, this is how science is supposed to work.
But then if you understand every possible word formulation, you know what the language means?
Well, you will know like okay, it's not really clear that language works that way. But let's say let's like test a theory that language works like this, and we'll say something like, what I'm getting at is that like you're saying there's, I don't know what interestingness means or meaningful. It's very weird. So when people say meaningful, they mean interesting. Is that the same thing? They're different words, at least in English.
I mean, meaningful, right? In what sense? In like the broad, like existential sense,
I don't know what existential meaningfulness
Meaning,
means.
like the people that
A lot of times
describe
it's
like the meaning of life.
It's like it's stimulation.
I don't know what the meaning of life is, but I know what the meaning of a word is, right? That's different. And I know what the meaning of pointing your finger at something is. That's a different kind of meaning.
Right? Or maybe the meaning of life is the same kind. But
Okay, right. To that extent, I understand it. To the extent that something else is implied, I don't.
okay, I don't know.
And even with outcomes, right? There are certain outcomes of the game that are more interesting than others, and not because I don't predict them, but there is a certain beauty in that organizational principle playing out in a specific way.
So I would say something like most people are not autistic. In other words, like they wouldn't enjoy just counting. Like how many numbers are there? Did you ever wonder? Okay, I've heard that there are an infinite amount, but who knows? Let's try it out.
You become a big YouTuber.
Yeah.
Every day you count more numbers.
It's not a joke. That's the big
I mean, no, but it's not. My daughter I drove my daughter this morning and she was like, she got up to 71 and she was very excited and she wanted to know what's after 70 or something. So it's not only like, there's obviously something to begin, like she's actually learning how numbers work by doing this, right? It's not like, there's the decimal system, there's things that are learned by doing this. The only thing is that when I tell you this, like you're laughing at me, like let's figure out if the numbers are actually infinite. Like let's set a computer to start counting maybe. The reason you find this boring is because you think it's the opposite. Because there's a basic, very simple rule, which is not actually simple, but there's like a simple rule that tells us why there has to be infinite amount of numbers, which is that, you know how it goes, right? What's the highest number?
The infinity plus 1.
Well, add 1 to the highest number, right? And for every number you can do this, therefore it doesn't seem to be a way to handle it, right? Now this is a logic that only works, this is very advanced logic. Like, it probably doesn't work on a baby. I don't think my 5-year-old daughter will understand it either, right? You're making a lot of assumptions, and who knows what those assumptions are. We need to ask Russell and so on. But in any case, it seems to make sense after you have a lot of base. And now what I'm trying to say is, it would be boring for us to enumerate all the options because we have a generalization that we think includes most of these options. So when I give you a word that's like a 10 letter word, you already understand that this is already telling you all the information you could have had with me enumerating all the different configurations of those 10 letters. Because this is actually telling you also that. It's showing you. So the fact that we have like these sort of seemingly random things that are interesting, they're really interesting because they reveal to us everything which is like very orderly and very like just ta 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 ta. It's just, and in order to know the ta 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 ta, it turns out that the best way to teach things is by poetry, not always by like autistically, right? Turns out that it's not necessarily true that, like I say, the Torah is a tree. But does that actually mean that you should teach first the tree and then the roots and then the branches? Well, the Rama wants it to be that way, and he teaches that way, but even he is not like really, it doesn't end up with a very dry book. It ends up with a less dry book than you would predict by doing that. And there's other people that have tried and end up very dry. And so there's some art here, right? There's some, you say like there's some variation, there's some randomness still in the story, right? ChatGPT or these things, their whole success is based on, like, if there would be a computer, people have done this for a long time, it turns out to be boring. The whole reason people think that they're human is because they're random. Like they have this, they add randomness into it, and that makes it sound like now it's human. Because until now, like, okay, and that's very bad. Whatever, I'm not getting into this. But the point is, like this randomness is what makes it interesting, right?
Mikra.
What?
Mikra.
The Mikra?
What is it? Gadol? What is that say?
What was the phrase?
I don't know.
The old phrase that dvarim gdolim inam.
Yeah. I don't know. Mikra.
Inam nitzim b'mikra. Yeah.
And yeah, this is all not. The point is that the reason why we have this, like, and it's always for certain people, I don't think it's because we really want it to not make sense. I think it's because it's just not true that it's just the opposite, because there's always one way which cuts through all of them. It's like there's one chess game that basically explains you all of them, and there might be certain chess games that are better than that than others.
Any chess game where all the pieces move. And the pawn gets to the end.
Exactly. Like for example, if someone wins too quickly, it's a boring game. If someone loses, and so on, right?
But that's
If
not
someone is
because
too good and the other opponent is too bad, it's boring, right?
That's not because of the principles, though.
It is. It's because it's not displaying all the attributes of this game.
No.
If there's a game in where like in 5 seconds checkmate in 5 moves, nothing really happened in the game. Okay, unless there's like some chachma, right?
I disagree because in meaning there are chess games where all the pieces move, and you understand in principle now how every single piece can move for eternity, right?
And it's still boring.
In every variation of the chess game, no one's like, the rook moved sideways, right? That's never that was interesting to someone.
I understand. What's interesting is the whole system.
I'm not even sure what people find quite interesting. There's certain things that like people would consider a brilliant move.
Right. How is it brilliant?
It's not so clear, right? It's just the pieces following the normal move.
Right, but the point is that usually a brilliant move is one, okay, I'm not...
It's one that cuts through the most distractions, maybe, and like focuses...
In other words, it's actually the things that we find interesting, okay, I'm not getting very sidetracked, but the things that we find interesting are usually the ones that reveal order in a better way than the direct way. That's my one sentence thing, right? So a genius is someone that could, like in the olden days, like a chacham was someone that could make aphorisms, like it used to be a big thing, right? Now the genius of aphorism, the Rambam has the thing about Chazal, they have this way of like the reducing a whole book to like one saying, like a kol sofer versus nissen, things like that. And the genius of that is not that it's random. It's not that it's not like mathematical, scientific. It's that it introduces the order in a better way, like the naive way, like is going back to the anti-enlightenment thing. Like the naive way of knowing everything would be Spinoza. Like we have to make math out of everything. Everything should be geometry. Right? There should be axioms and postulates and propositions and things like that.
Do that for beauty?
And there's a beauty in that. And the whole reason it's the opposite. Like people nowadays say the whole reason we do that is because it's beautiful, not because it's true. Right? What beauty means is that it displays a lot of the complexity in a simple way or in a clear way. So it reveals the complexity, but it reveals how it's one, right? It all goes back to like this oneness idea or things like that. Point is, it's contrary to what someone would say that, like some brilliant move is better than just enumerating all the possible moves. The reason it's better is because by enumerating all the possible moves, it takes a very long time to understand how it works. And by this one brilliant move, you could do it in one sentence or in one move. Of course, you need the correct context for it to make sense, but that's the thought, and therefore, are there more?
It's another way of saying that the principle is the only thing that's interesting, and,
yes.
And the stimulation is when you get to the principle.
Exactly. And I would think that even things like you talk about, like imagination, that is looking for interestingness. There's, in a certain sense, like. The Rambam thinks that imagination doesn't ever grasp universals, like you can't see universal, you can only think it. So therefore, you can't dream universal, you always dream specific things, particular things, concrete things. Therefore, that's a bad way of thinking. It's really only halfway bad, like he himself says, because it does display the principles in some way. And like a good play is supposed, like we discussed, a good play is supposed to teach you something about humanity, not about that guy, right? And it's brilliant by being particular and displaying the universal. It's not brilliant by just being particular. Like being a Jew is supposed to be the best way of being a human. In any case, all back to our thing, that means, and there might be freedom. You see, there's this question of freedom, how necessary are things? And again, people have this very naive view that has to be like very simply necessary. Not really clear to me. Like it could be, and the Rambam, that's why people are get very lost with this historicism here. Like the Rambam says, the reason why, so someone will going back to like Al Pesach, the reason why we have matzah in order to remember Yitzias Mitzrayim instead of doing some other thing that you would think like is more simply follows from the principle of remembering Yitzias Mitzrayim, like, okay, not making a note, that's dumb, that never works. But something like, I don't know, can you think of something else? Actually hard to think of other things, That's another point, but that goes back to my previous point. But the point is, assuming that there's other ways, I'm sure there are other ways. Or you could say, like, let's eat matzah all year and chametz on Pesach. I don't know. Let's say it would be the opposite. Now, you could say, okay, so there's like a path dependency. There is a reason why this way was chosen, and some of the reason might be because we lived in a certain place, and that was what they did, and things like that. But that doesn't make it less true. It doesn't make it less of an expression of the principle, right? The fact that the same word can be said in so many languages doesn't mean that those languages are not saying this word. This is one of the ways in which you can get both ways, but not in the same necessary way. In other words, this is one of the ways in which, let's say I translate the same idea in a whole bunch of different languages, or even in different registers and poetry and so on. You could say, okay, so if you could do the same thing in all of them, so which one is it really? So is it necessarily one of them? Well, it's sort of only one way. In other words, from bottom up, it's true that this image that I'm giving you is really an image of the principle. But it's not true that the only image the principle have is this. Not right.
I think basically what you're saying is that if people have an overly idealized world, that they think that the contingent things are ideal. They're not, so it's going to play out.
Well, that's what I usually say. That's what I usually say. What I'm saying today is that.
No, I don't mean it as strong as you're saying. You say usually. That's right. It's actually a little bit different. But the point is, they think there's this perfect way of running the time.
There is a perfect way, but there's maybe more than one perfect way.
But I don't think that is perfect. For example, it won't always work at all places at all time, right? That kind of thing doesn't exist. That's what they're not. It's okay, fine. That is how everything, all principles play out. They flow through and they play into eating.
There is no uniformity in terms in application, right? Only uniformity in
yes, but it's still really an application of that, right? What I'm trying to get at, it's still really an application of that, even though there might be another real way to do it.
But the point being is that the best possible way isn't that principle, because it's literally not that principle.
Right, I understand that. What chooses and what determines.
It does not mean during the best possible circumstances also.
What determines which of these branching ways we take is not necessarily the principle. It's something more in the branches. That's what you're saying. It's in other words, let's take a stupid example, okay? Okay, I guess this whole class is going to be hacks. So Rabbi Hershel Schachter says like this. Rabbi Hershel Schachter has a video that says, what is modern? You know this drusha. I gave it to you?
I don't know.
So Rabbi Hershel Schachter says, what is modern orthodoxy? Someone asked him, what is modern orthodoxy? And these boys in the yeshiva. So he says, modern orthodoxy is like this. It's modern and it's orthodox. Okay. So what does that mean? So it means like this. It's orthodox, so it doesn't change. Somehow orthodox means not changing. And meaning, so for example, on Shabbos, there's a chiyuv to have nice clothing. Oine kavod Shabbos. So we keep that halacha. It's a mitzvah, the Raisa, the Rabban. We keep it. We're not saying we don't have to. But Tzad Sheni, we're modern. So what does that mean? It means that it doesn't say in the Torah that you have to wear Shtreimels Shabbos. It says you have to dress nicely. So in Eastern Europe or wherever, 300 years ago, nice was a Shtreimel. But now nice is my hat. So firstly, this is just wrong. Shtreimel is nicer than his hat. Just doesn't have any aesthetics, this guy. Seriously? I'm just very purely, you could say it's weird, it's out of touch, it doesn't fit in. A Shtreimel is definitely nicer than any hat that this guy wears. It's assuming that aesthetics.
Oh, in Washington Heights.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right? You have nice hats.
Yeah.
But he doesn't.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, he doesn't. You saw his hat? He doesn't dress nicely on Shabbos. That's not true. There's stupidest guy that wears a Shtreimel back is dressing nicer on Shabbos than him. So firstly, this is just wrong.
With the vests, yeah.
The socks,
vests,
everything.
Sweater vests. Those are not going to cut it. That's not dressing nicer Shabbos. This package is better.
Shine, you see? So that's number one. Now you would. So what I'm arguing. Okay, there's a lot of arguments that I can make against this Torah, although it seems very reasonable. But it's just a good mushal for showing the problem of this, simply even the modern orthodoxy is to reform, because it seems to not get. Also, yeah, and for the same reason, he doesn't realize that keeping Shabbos itself is not better, because you could say, well, the point is to have a day of rest. Why does it have to be on the seventh day? What about Sunday? And he's like, no, you have to get up into arbitrary. Because of that, he gets stuck in these arbitrary, historical cutoffs. Whatever was invented until ich weiß nicht was 108 BC is the Torah, and there's no reason why having a Shtreimel should be more real than there's no logical reason. There's historical reasons. It should be more real than not carrying on Shabbos or something. That's and therefore he has to. That's why all modern Orthodox Jews believe in this concept of a law, which was invented by Kant or someone, and they think that Moshe Rabbeinu invented it. Anyway, can't invent laws. But anyways, someone. Point is, what I really want to say is something different. What I really want to say is, I agree, right? This is a good argument and principle. There is no principle to wear Shtreimel on Shabbos. It doesn't say in the Torah to wear Shtreimel on Shabbos, and there's no such idea. Why? Who cares? There's no such idea. But assuming that we agree with him that there is an idea to dress nicely, right? It's actually, like we said before, it's not actually so simple to get to dress nicely. Like saying, just go to the store and ask for the nicest thing, that doesn't get you a nice dress. Right? It doesn't. Nowhere. I mean, you got to know what you're buying, right? Otherwise, you get sold by some celebrity niceness of the day, which is like, the Emperor's new clothes or something. It's very easy to get fooled. So assuming, okay, you can say beauty is subjective and everything, but I hope that he's not that much of a nihilist to think that, right? So assuming that there's such a thing as being nice, because otherwise the whole question doesn't begin,
If you disagree with this, there's a share on this. So
and what? On beauty being objective?
If you disagree
Yeah.
with this,
The point is, his halacha is not, I don't know, it doesn't matter, it's not relevant, because you can't say that the halacha is to wear something that people think is nice. That sounds very weird. Obviously, if it's halacha to dress nicely, I don't know if there's such a halacha.
Where are you from? If you're from here, then
Wait, but that's not the halacha. So it's the halacha to dress what people think is nice, or the halacha to dress nicely? I don't know. It's a good question. Not a question. But even both of them, by the way, in any of them, it doesn't matter for my argument. In both of these ways, it turns out that it's not actually true that this is easy. In other words, I agree with him in principle. Let's say I agree with him in principle that you don't have to wear Shtreimel. You could wear any beautiful clothing. If you ask Shmuley, he'll tell you what to wear. But most people don't have access to it. So therefore, it's a problem, right? So therefore, yeah, maybe. So therefore, there was some Jew that figured out that I have a solution to this problem. Turns out that tradition is a solution to this problem. He doesn't recognize this is a problem, that's what I'm trying to get at. There's something missing about his analysis of human nature. In general, everything that Rabbi Hershel Schachter says is like this. But there's something missing in his understanding of human nature. Like, he thinks that this is not a problem. Well, just wear whatever is nice. Well, turns out that his hat is also, he's also wearing it as a tradition. The whole thing is a lie. But anyways, tradition, this is a basic problem. How do we dress nicely? I mean, of course, even without Shabbos, it's a problem. Like, we need to coordinate them. It's got to have standards, and we need to, there's only a certain amount of tailors that can make a certain amount of patterns.
Suits are very helpful for this reason. Meaning, in terms of back when it was standardized.
Well, because all men look good in suits, or supposed to.
It's harder to mess up than a lot of other configurations, right? Meaning, if you say everyone has to wear a suit, you'll have some people in bad suits, but they'll never.
Okay, but this even then.
Some of the basic points line up.
But it's exact, very good. So I have people. You see, Hershel Schachter is already ancient, right? He still thinks that wearing a suit is nice. Like if you go to all of my friends and all the Misnachlim people, they're like, well, a t-shirt and sandals is beautiful. Might be beautiful for a trip or something, not beautiful for Shabbos. I don't know, or maybe it is. Who knows? Because that's what they like. I don't think they have like this ideal of. They don't think it's beautiful. Anyways, but they think something like it's the minig. It's more like that's really a subjective thing. They don't think it's beautiful. They think it's a minig. And then I'm saying like, okay, so you realize, or even if there's conflicting standards, like what is beautiful. So it turns out that this thing that he's laughing at, like, why do you wear Shtreimel? It's very old. It's actually a solution to a problem that he doesn't realize exists, because he pretends that things are simple. It actually solves the problems, like you're saying, most people actually look at Shtreimels. Do they? I have no idea.
I don't.
You don't like it. Okay.
No, I don't look good in it.
Oh no? You trying?
There's
There's a lot of different styles of Shtreimels. You have to ask the real Mimcha of Shtreimel.
It's much shorter.
Oh, okay, because the Shtreimel, there's only like one style of Shtreimel that everyone gets. Okay.
Yeah, I'm into the short ones. If I had to, I want to do short.
Yeah, okay, so then maybe that's be more variation in the Shtreimel store. I don't know why they only sell one type. Probably. Yeah, okay, say that. What I'm trying to get at is that this thing is a solution to a problem. It's a solution to the problem of how do we get people to dress nicely on Shabbos. And turns out that just following tradition is usually what humans do. And they've always done this. Like everyone wears a suit because some guy in England invented the concept of suits. And most people wear pants because it's practical and things like that.
Also in England.
Yeah.
I mean, you had pants before, but the pants that we wear.
See? So, and the point being, what is my point? Now, you could say something like this. Now, what I'm getting back is like this. So, is a Shtreimel a Kavod Shabbos? What is the Kedusha of a Shtreimel, right? Kedusha Shabbos is the mitzvah, right? The mitzvah. or Yoif Kavod Shabbos, whatever. So is the Shtreimel really Kavod Shabbos? Like if you're a naive Chassidish Yid, you say Shtreimel is Shabbos, like it says in the Torah. Yeah, exactly. I've wrote a whole shtickle Torah about this already once, and more than one. It says V'yatziyak is so different. You have to wear Shtreimel Shabbos. So that's a very naive way of saying it, right? Or you could say the total opposite, which is no. It's the Yofia, the beauty of Shabbos that has a value, and now what? You see, now you're getting stuck. And now what? So the way they express it is nothing. You can express it any way. Well, you have to express it at least one way. So you see, it's not really infinite. So in other words, maybe there's an infinite way, things that occur on Shabbos, but each one of them, what's going to be the din of each one of them? Is each one of them going to be Kavod Shabbos or not? And once you agree to me that one of them is an expression of Kavod Shabbos, then it seems to me that being stuck on one of them is not such a bad, crazy idea like you think. Yeah, this is getting at the Tzaref Sabrius. Because the Tzaref Sabrius is answering the question, why is Shtreimel not a baseball cap? Well, the answer is something like this, one answer is that baseball caps are ugly. But the other answer, and in other words, there is a limit to this. And then you say, okay, but there's more than one. Obviously, Shtreimels are not the only thing, there's other things. But the answer would be, okay, but each one of them is by itself holy. Each one of itself has a Kavod Shabbos in it. And now, if you'll ask me, so why do I care to doing this and not to do the other ones? The answer is because people say the Rambam says things like you have to choose one. Like he has this thing, like I'll tell you 7, you'll ask me why not 8. If you ask me 8, well, not 7. So why didn't you just list me and do 7? That strikes people as a very stupid answer. But I think that if you think about it slightly better, you'll realize that it's actually the truth. Because the fact that it's not infinite, right, in both ways. It's not infinite in the sense of we can't do nothing and we can't do everything either. Because baseball caps, everyone's mind is not covered for Shabbos. Right? You agree? Maybe there's some beautiful one, I don't know. Point is, the one that we're talking about, right? That's not. So it's not infinite, right? So it's actually the definiteness, the choosing one is actually true. Now the fact that there is theoretically other ones is again too infinite for humanity, right? There are theoretically, potentially other things besides Shtreimels. Guess what? There are also potentially other ways of being a good person besides for being Jewish. And not only are there probably are people that are doing that, and let them do it. But that doesn't help me at all. It doesn't make any difference to me. It doesn't change much for me. Because I can't be that person. Right? In other words, I can't be both of them. I could be one of them. You can choose, but you can't do both. And you can't, while you're doing one, be also the other one. So this one, this detail, this specific configuration is Kavod Shabbos. It really is. Well, you could say something like, is it all of Kavod Shabbos? Maybe it's not all of Kavod Shabbos. I left some for the other guy. But it's not relevant to me in some sense. These are like basic Kabbalah problems of like how could is the whole God in every place or only part of God, things like this. It's basically the same language for the same question, right? Is Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash? Well, is he also somewhere else? So is part of him? No, all of him is all over. So therefore,
are you saying Shtreimels are intrinsically beautiful?
Yeah. No, there's two things. I'm saying that they're intrinsically. No, not beautiful. Well, they're beautiful besides the fact, but again, some kind of beauty. Okay, they pass they're not ugly, right? They're not ugly in the way that baseball caps are ugly. They might be ugly in a different way, but they're not ugly in the way baseball caps are ugly. So they're in like the cap. If they would be ugly, then they fulfill the minimum of being a nice thing, and at least they're expensive. They're that's also maybe part of being beautiful. Who knows? Because usually things that are expensive take effort to create, right? That's like a real thing. Like effort is...
In some economies.
Right, no, let's say like painting, you know what I mean?
A Shtreimel is always going to be expensive. I mean, it's very expensive now, but it's always going to take more effort to create than a yarmulke, right? Yarmulke is just a piece of cloth, seriously. And a Shtreimel is something that some guy has to at least capture all those minks or whatever they make it out of and kill them. It's a whole process. At least something more going on. Which means it can have more complexity and more beauty. It can be more ugly also, but something.
Would a smarter way to say what he's saying, I mean, it doesn't mean exactly what he's saying, but basically, that the difference is that we don't get so caught up in the contingent way to do it, so we let it shift slowly, whatever. We don't change every day and whatever, we don't care at all. But
wait. So what I'm saying is, I'm going to answer him. Finished. So I was saying it is not ugly. And it also is intrinsic. Yes, I want to say that it's intrinsically, although it's not necessarily the the beauty of Shabbos. Like I'm even saying not only beautiful, because beautiful is not relevant to me, my discussion, his discussion. He's talking about like halachos Shabbos. It's also really inherently and intrinsically, like you say, it's not accidentally.
It's sufficient.
Yes, it really intrinsically expresses the Kedusha Shabbos. Now, why does it express Kedusha Shabbos? Of course, the history that he's saying is true. Because at some point during the history, this is what the Yidden settled on as being the beauty for Shabbos. And what I'm saying is that although it's true that it could have been different, and obviously it's still different, there's other people that don't do it, and nobody's saying that they're Machal Shabbos or anything, but it happens to be that most of them don't have, it's not like someone has a better solution, just to be very real. Of course, it's hot, there's practical problems with it and so on. I'm not saying that that's not a problem, but you haven't found a lightweight one that looks as beautiful. Don't lie. It bothers me. Like, why do you lie? It's just ugly. Okay, like there's ways of, I'm not saying, but in general, like, so point being, in other words, so it's both a solution to the problem and it's both really true. Now, the fact that it's not necessarily the only one doesn't make it less really. And that seems to be the same question that people have with all the mitzvahs. Like the fact that we could have not have ever been in Mitzrayim. Like it doesn't seem to be a law of the universe that we should have been in Mitzrayim. Right? But we happen to have been, that happen to have expressed whatever true things happened there. Right?
Meaning we can't have all the mitzvahs. That would be too many for us.
What do you mean all the mitzvahs?
Meaning, let's say Yitzchok reveals a certain, that let's say aspect of freedom that's like in some ways essential to us as people, right? Let's say, right? So we have matzah as a current for that kind of freedom or redemption or whatever. But a different set of experiences might have revealed a different fundamental feature about us that would have given us a different mitzvah. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Right, and not all
I don't know if there's different fundamental
the
features.
mitzvahs cover all those possibilities.
So there's another question about fundamental features. When you say different fundamental features, I would say, and if someone wants to argue there's different fundamental features, that's more like polytheistic. But I would say there's only there's a definite amount of fundamental features of the world, and they all can be expressed in more than one way, or at least it seems theoretically true. If they were historically expressed in more than one way, is an empirical question. But they can be
expressed at all, or if they find expression in mitzvahs.
Also true. Also a question, where some of them maybe were never expressed. But I don't know if there's more than one fundamental feature of the world, anyways. So that's not really.
I'm saying, but I'm not saying at the actual base of the tree. I'm just saying, is it possible that we have one branch on one side and all the branches on the other side?
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. Yeah, I think it's possible. I don't know if that's the case, though.
No,
it's possible.
And obviously it's true.
It seems to be possible.
Obviously, not every portion of the bark has a branch, right? And not all the branches are on one side of the tree. But my question is, I guess, I mean, I think
so. It's interesting. What your question is a much more serious question. What people are usually worried about is not this. In other words, what people are usually worried about is the fact that the specific way the branch is doesn't seem to be necessitated by the way in which the trunk is. And what I'm saying is that that's not a problem.
Well,
that's
the
fine.
Got to grow from somewhere, right?
Exactly, because it has to be somewhere. Now, could it be from everywhere? Could it be? That's a different question.
You can't have a tree that's all branches, right?
Yeah, but then now we get into like trying to claim that more things are necessary than we need to.
Can you identify a place where a branch is missing, or at least understand?
Right, that would be a more serious question. I actually think that's a much more serious question, and those are questions that I can't answer simply. In other words, that's not a question that the Rambam is ever worried about. There are Mekabalim that are worried about things like this. The Rambam is never worried about that, and people that argue with the Rambam are not worried about things like that. There are people that are worried about things like this, like you'd say something like, well, all we know about God is two things, and maybe there's more things that are true to know about Him, and maybe there's a different religion that knows those things, and we don't know them. These would be serious questions. Then that would be interesting to discuss. Everything until now is to answer stupid questions. That would be a good question. Like maybe there's a whole different tree. Like I said, that's almost close to that's an interesting question. That would be a good question. I don't know if I haven't answered that question. I would probably say that practically people are not good at focusing at more than one thing. They're really good at one thing. So, first let's finish that. But theoretically, it's definitely possible. It might even be, like you said, it might be necessarily possible, but it's definitely possible that the way in which things are is not the only. In other words, what I'm saying is like this: if you start from Yesod Torah Perek Aleph, there is a way it's true, what I'm saying like this, it's true, just go back, it's true that the first halacha in Siddur Torah is the cause of all the other ones. And if anyone argues with this, he's making all the mistakes that we discussed. And it's also true that I don't know many people that have figured out a better way. I mean, of course there are, but it's actually very limited. By the way, even if there are, it's only like 5. Like people, like if you actually start trying to be like, it's also very hard. But even if there are, there's very limited. It's not as infinite as you think they are, at least in practice. How many religions are there really? They're like 600, but like, come on, there's only like 3. Basically, everyone else is doing variations on the same thing. Like everyone has holidays, everyone has days of rest, everyone has all these things. Are like people like say like, this is not trying to universalize it. This is just saying, like there's only limited amount of ways in which humans act, and it's not like
universalize it, but it's a good thing.
Yeah, what I mean to say is not like someone say, well, the Shabbos is a good thing because even they're going to have Sunday. What I'm saying is that let's go one step before that, right? Well, why do we even like rest one day? Like, yeah, you could say like it's nature or something. But the point is, there's a very limited amount of way. Like, why do we commemorate the creation by Shabbos? Well, there's only 5 things that humans can do b'chlal. So one of them is resting, the other one is working, and the other one is like there's only 3 things. So then you ask this question: so why Shabbos and not Sunday? And I'll tell you, well, why Sunday and not Shabbos? And in other words, the fact that it could be different doesn't make this not real. That's what I'm saying. When you want to say something different, which is like, okay, Shabbos is about God creating the world and resting. What about God doing something different? Who knows what? That we never thought of. Maybe some people in Tibet think about that. And they have a whole religion based on that, which also gives them 613 mitzvahs, different ones.
Or 722.
Yeah, or four essential truths. Anyways, and 8-fold paths and 12 ways of getting into kids. They play the same game. In any case, in any case, the answer is that's a better question. That's my answer for today. That would be a good question. And probably the monotheists like to assume that it can't be because there's only one God, which means only one thing important. And therefore, that doesn't make sense. But that's only a good question. That's too naive to be a good answer. I think that some Kabbalim would say that yes, and maybe in the next life you'll do that one. Or something like that. But the thing of a next life is good because it shows you that one human life is very small. Like it finishes in 5 minutes. And like you're really asking me this crazy question. Like, what if there's another universe? Like another intellectual universe? Like another, yeah, okay, we'll do that next lifetime. That seems to be a reasonable answer just for it fits the size of the question you're asking, right? We'll take care of that in the next Gilgul. Oh, there's no next Gilgul? Too bad. There is? I don't know. I hope there is, because otherwise we'll be stuck with only doing one thing. Yeah. Or the next Shmita of the universe, who knows? So I think that's enough, I think. Anyways, my main argument is still that, like, come on. Shtreimels is actually nicer than what he figured out. So, like, why does he pretend that it's all the same thing? You could say, okay, it's not even true what he's saying. He should say, okay, like, I have this social pressure. I feel weird wearing a Shtreimel in Manhattan, so I'm not doing it. Okay, that would be the truth. But it's not true that he's not wearing a Shtreimel because he doesn't seem to him beautiful. I don't know. Maybe I'm biased.
I think I've seen very rare circumstances where a Shtreimel was proportionate to the person's head in a serious way.
That's because there's only one style for it.
Like, I've seen some of the spudiks that look much nicer.
Yeah.
I think I've seen more spudiks that look nicer than all Shtreimels.
Okay, that's a different question. Yeah, you could shut it off. Thank you.
I think the